Great, thank you. Welcome, everybody. We're going to open our meeting this morning with a karakia, and Kim's going to do that for us. Thank you.
Tuia ki rongo, tuia ki raro, tuia ki roto, tuia ki waho, tuia tato te tangata, ki te kaupapa o te nui o te hui nei, ki te kaupapa o te rangi nei, mori ora ki te kia tato katoa.
Good. Thank you. Some housekeeping. Welcome, everybody. And welcome to those on Zoom. And I see we have our board member Armstrong is on Zoom, and Catherine from media is there. Welcome, Max. And otherwise, I think staff people. Can't quite see. And just a reminder that our meeting's being recorded today, and that's available on Council's YouTube channel. Please keep your microphones muted, and if you're on Zoom, raise your hand. For those that may not know, toilets and exits out through the door here, toilets out to the left, and we've got some exit signs here should we have an emergency. We have apologies. Have an apology from Councillor Greening and from Councillor Walker, and an apology from Mayor King for lateness. Somebody's happy to move those apologies. Councillor Ellis, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Maru, thank you. All those in favour, we say aye. Against? Carried. Oh yes. So board member Knowles was maybe going to be, so perhaps anyway. He'll arrive or he won't. I don't think he's up there. Thank you. I'm going to move to public forum. We've got 3 speakers on public forum this morning. Welcome. And I'd like to just give some reminders around our guidelines for presenting a public forum, which is that individuals can speak for up to 5 minutes and those representing an organisation up to 10. It's clear that speakers aren't to criticise elected members or staff. That's not the purpose of the forum. And speakers shouldn't be repetitive. So if it's an item that somebody's brought previously, then not to speak to it again. And matters subject to legal proceedings can't be spoken to here. And for elected members, it's not really a question, a to and fro session, but there can be questions for clarifying. So I'm going to begin with Cynthia McConville, come away from Golden Bay this morning. Welcome. You will need to press a button, yes. If you bring the speaker towards you, yes. Just bring it in a bit closer towards you.
All right.
Welcome, and over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm here today to ask Council to resume the work on a Vehicles on Beaches bylaw that was started in mid-2022 by staff member and policy planner Mayan Bengozi. A bylaw to control the use of vehicles on our beaches in Golden Bay is supported by the Forest and Bird membership, the Tākaka Office of the Department of Conservation, and local iwi Mana Whenua ki Maupua. Council has the power under the Land Transport Act 1998 and the Local Government Act 2002 to regulate the use of vehicles on beaches. It isn't only the disturbance to our shorebirds, their harassment, or the deliberate destruction of their nesting sites that our community is concerned about. It is the right of people to the peaceful enjoyment of our beaches. Today, sollies are blocking off the vehicle entry onto the beach that is on the Department of Conservation property at Collingwood. The work is being paid for by 2 Collingwood residents who are, to put it bluntly, fed up with the noise and disturbance created by joyriders. These people wish to remain anonymous due to possible retaliation. I have a report from a Collingwood local of 2 farming families arriving at Tinky's Hotel for lunch and drinks, and 4 young people with them taking their farm bikes out onto the tidal flats to joyride. As one person said to me on Tuesday, they are socialising their children to joyride on our beaches. If you go to the Waka Kotahi website, you will see that ATVs are only allowed on our beaches under certain conditions. They need to be registered and licensed. The drivers must have a New Zealand driver's licence. They must wear safety helmets, and general driver behaviour applies. The only time this is waived is when a farmer is travelling from one part of their farm to another or to an adjoining farm at a speed lower than 30 kilometres an hour. From the observations of our community members, these conditions are not being met. Both Waka Kotahi and the police need to work together to inform owners of these vehicles of the requirements for their legal use. The graphic and text that I've given you today is for signage we are installing next to the Collingwood vehicle entry that is being blocked off today. You will see in the graphic how our waders use the intertidal flats to feed. They only get one chance to feed, and that is when the tide recedes. Joyriding on the intertidal flats at low tide coincides with feeding time for our shorebirds. The use of motorised vehicles on our beaches is a permitted activity under section 25221 of the TRMP, provided that certain conditions are met. Much of the vehicle activity we have on our coastline is not meeting these conditions and is therefore not a permitted activity. Providing evidence for a prosecution involves following these people to their vehicles, photographing vehicle number plates and/or following them to their place of residence, then reporting the incident to police. There is a personal safety risk in doing this. Forest and Bird are the recipients of frequent complaints about vehicles on beaches from residents who have concerns for their personal safety or if they personally report people retribution. Let me read you excerpts from some of these. From Pakawa, the tidal flats and beach dunes were completely chewed up. The devastation still noticeable after 4 or 5 tides. The noise was heard by all and sounded like a motocross was taking place all day, each day. This was over Easter weekend. There must be a law that stops mindless joyriding on quad bikes and dirt bikes in these areas of international importance for the survival of our shorebirds. I truly hope that a law is put in place very soon so my daughter has a future of seeing these beautiful birds on our shores. From Rangihaiata, I have personally witnessed dirt bikes travelling in excess of 100 kilometres an hour and having to listen to their screaming exhausts as they travel back and forth through multitudes of birds far out on the tidal flats. On those days, I often think about selling my little beach cottage to get away from the intrusive motorised vehicles driving incessantly up and down our beach. Both writers wish to remain anonymous. One other resident was threatened with assault by the father of 2 girls who were riding their motorbikes up and down the beach. He will no longer speak up. So why do we have residents living in fear? Because they don't wish to put up with constant disturbance or because they care about our shorebirds. I can assure you there are many more complaints I could read to you. Bringing an evidence-based prosecution against riders under the TRMP for damage to the seabed or to animal habitats is challenging, if not impossible. You have to be on site. You have to provide photographs or video footage. You need to identify vehicles that are not registered and or follow drivers to their residence. Maintaining the status quo means that vehicle users will continue to have unrestricted access to and along the coast. The only realistic option Council can consider to remedy the issues our community is facing is to develop and put in place a vehicles on beaches bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Any questions from councillors? I've got one to do with the work that's happening today at the Collingwood Reserve. Is that a dock reserve?
It's a dock property. It's the one with I think it's a holiday home.
Yeah.
You know, on 49 Beach Road on the opposite side, on the ocean side.
So
Yes.
Dock have agreed to have
Yes,
rocks
yeah.
put along there.
Andrew Lamson's very happy to do that. Yes. Yeah.
And paid for by some residents.
By residents, yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Okay. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks a lot, Cynthia. Martin, not Martin. Martin was going to be here, but sorry.
Glenn.
Oh, welcome, Glenn. Martin has not well, and Glenn's riding shotgun.
Yeah.
You've got 5 minutes, and I'll let you know if you're at 4 or something like that. Yeah.
No, all good. Thank you very much. Yes, hello, I'm Glenn Lays. I'm replacing Martin O'Connor, who has COVID. Thank you for giving me a chance to speak. I'm speaking about Section 8, specific river management issues, paragraph 8.9 on today's agenda. I'm representing the O'Connor family who have farmed on the west bank of the Waimea River since 1855. I am the farm manager and have been lucky enough to be with the O'Connors for the last 35 years and been on the farm. Fergus O'Connor, who owned the land, worked in local government to have the stop banks built so that the livelihoods could be protected across the Waimea Plains from the large damaging floods that the Waimea River produces. The O'Connor family have leased the land on the riverside of the stop banks for decades and have used this land as part of their milking platform and as an important part of the whole operation. The issue today is the council wants to put a bike track down the stop bank, which the dairy cows cross on a regular basis. The bike track would cross 2 entry points to the berm land and run alongside access roads for a fair distance. The problem arises when you are shifting cows over the stop bank or alongside it as a mob. The stop banks are approximately 5 metres high. Cyclists could appear at any moment above the cows. The arrival of the cyclists above the cows can lead to panic in the herd, creating risk for the cows' health, the farm staff's safety, as well as posing a risk to the cyclists. I have experienced this where I was shifting cows over the bank and a walker stopped at the gate on top of the stop bank and the cows took fright and charged back past me. 250 cows can be a very scary thing when things go wrong. The person on the top of the stop bank did not understand what was happening and had to be told in fairly blunt terms to move. I do not anticipate this will change with fast-moving cyclists. As we have had many close calls with cyclists on the cycle track at the bottom of Cotterells Road with a large amount of ignorance being displayed. We have employed senior FarmWise consultant Brent Boyce to review the proposal put forward by council to give his opinion on how this might work. I I have sent some of these to some of our councillors. I'm sorry today, the printer buggered out, ran out of ink, and I've only just purely managed to get this speech done today. We have worked with council on this for a long time. It appears that it is the cycleway on top of the stop bank or nothing. The council have not produced any examples of these unique crossings with dairy cows and cyclists interacting on a high stop bank. An alternative exists by reinstating the old dump road on the west bank. Fixing this road would have many benefits. It would allow cyclists to access the river at many points. It would allow many people who have used the river in the past to access the lower reaches of the river for whitebaiting and fishing. It also opens up swimming and dog walking opportunities. Only those with four-wheel drives have access to the lower reaches, so those who do not have such vehicles have no access. Opening up the road would allow more public policing of those who choose to dump waste on the river. It would also help the river environment, keeping a large number of vehicles out of the river. The local fire brigade would also like the road improved because currently they access this area through they access this area through our farm, which can be problematic if we are shifting stock or on farm tracks or even not at home. There are many examples of shared cycle paths around the district: Lower Queen Street, Tapawera Baton Road. So a shared path is not a unique situation. A different situation seems to exist immediately opposite on the east bank, where the existing road is being used as a bike trail and the farmer gets to have full use of the berm leases.
You're nearly at 5, Glenn.
Oh.
Have you got some key, are there some key extra points? What would be the main thing you'd like to emphasise in the last few moments?
This land is very important to us for our farming operation. We are rural one land where we are. I understand over the stop bank it would probably not be deemed rural one land, but with us in our farming operation, we run it as rural one. Yeah, if we're buggered if this goes through. And yeah, we would like to carry on farming. We've been farming for a long time, and that's what we do. And we're bringing money into the community. And yeah, I just think we need to look at it.
Thanks, Glenn. Yeah, your points are well made, and people here are certainly aware of what you're concerned about, and you are in contact with some of your ward councillors. I think
I have sent some the correspondence that we've had with council to them.
Great. And if you'd like a copy of your notes and information you could email it through to.
I've got a couple of copies of this.
Yes, if you leave it with Rachel, then she can have that scanned out to us so that we can reread it. It'll be great. Thank you for coming in. Sorry to cut you short.
No, sorry.
Yeah.
Cheers.
And Matthias, finally, our last public forum speaker. I think you know how this goes. Yeah. Welcome.
Hello, good morning. Last week in the strategy and policy meeting, you had a bit of a discussions about the 8-week rule and the TRMP and enforcement actions against people living in caravans, camper vans, trailers, tiny houses. I'm not here today to say that this rule is good or bad, or that the enforcement actions are right or wrong, but I think it's common ground that enforcement actions are indeed carried out against these people. And I'm not sure when this all started, but looking at meeting minutes and speaking to people, it seems it's ongoing for about 10 years now, that council takes actively enforcement actions against someone who lives in a so-called unconsented dwelling. I asked council for a specific number, how many cases they have enforced in the last year, but no number could be provided to me because there are thousands of service requests that enforcement staff handled just last year alone, and it's not tracked how many were in relation to unconsented dwellings. So I suggest you track this number to see how big this problem actually is. But looking at a longer time frame, let's say 10 years, then I think we can agree more or less that we speak about at least 100 occasions about enforcement actions against people living in unconsented dwellings. Otherwise, this topic would not come up again and again in so many meetings over all these years. So then the question is, how can an enforcement officer enter private property to enforce some actions? There are two sections in the Resource Management Act. The first one is section 332, which is power of entry for inspection. And the other one is 334, which is called application for warrant for entry for search, or we can say it's to use a search warrant to enter private property. And now the question is when to use what sections in the RMA, or when can an enforcement officer go onto private property without a search warrant, and when is a search warrant required? And to draw the line between these two sections, we had a really good court case in Auckland in the High Court 20 years ago, and this case was exactly about this, when to use section 332 or 334 of the RMA. And I would just quote a few lines from this final judgment in the High Court. Quote, where there are reasonable grounds for believing that an offense has been or is being committed either as a result of evidence obtained on an earlier inspection or as a result of other evidence before the council and or enforcement officer, and the purpose of the visit to a property is not to determine compliance but to obtain further evidence, then a search warrant under section 334 is required. And then also the position of the Law Commission was referenced in this High Court case, and they said, the Commission then identified the powers under 332 as falling within Group 1 as powers of routine administrative inspection, whereas powers under 334 were the other group, powers to be exercised where an offense is suspected. So a routine administrative inspection is, for example, the monitoring of a riverbank, if it collapses or not. Or in my case, it's a protected tree that sits on my property. And for that, council can go onto my property and do an inspection of the tree under section 332. Search warrant not needed, no problem with that. But the issue arises when we speak about, and these are your words, unconsented dwelling, because then it's not a routine administrative inspection anymore. And even if you have not finally determined that someone actually lives in the caravan, trailer, camper van, tiny house, whatever, it doesn't matter, because your enforcement officer, enforcement staff, they come with a suspicion that someone lives in there. Otherwise, they would not act in the first place. So there is suspicion. And then it's not monitoring or inspection anymore. Then it is called an investigation. And this is actually how it's called in council's internal documentation. So your enforcement officer, they use the words investigate and investigation a lot in this document. And it's correct to use the word investigation. And here I have such a document from a few years ago where there was an investigation about an alleged unconsented dwelling. And we see in one page alone, 7 times it's used the word investigate or investigation. But when you investigate or you do an investigation, you need a search warrant. Investigation equals search warrant to enter private property. This is established in the High Court 20 years ago. Then the second situation where you must have a search warrant is when doing investigation or even just an inspection or whatever you do in relation to a so-called dwelling house. And in the same court case, the judge said, it is significant in my view that section 332 does not permit inspection of a dwelling house and that the search warrant is still required for that. And the meaning of the dwelling house under the RMA is a building whether permanent or temporary that's occupied in whole or in part as residence and includes any structure or outdoor living area that is accessory to it. So the concept of the dwelling house includes the outdoor living area, the car park, the sheds, adjacent buildings, even the veggie garden. So the dwelling house under the RMA is not just the inside of something, it's a much wider concept and includes a lot of space around the camper van, trailer, tiny house, whatever we talk about. And the Ministry of Environment confirms this in their guide called Compliance Monitoring Enforcement under RMA. They write, authority to enter a dwelling house is explicitly excluded from section 332. It is important to note that a dwelling house can have quite a broad application and can include such things as caravans, the bunkhouse of a commercial fishing vessel, or anywhere a person might expect to have privacy associated with personal living space. So inspection of an unconsented dwelling, how you call it in council, under section 332 RMA is not possible, or in my view, it's legally not possible because of the concept of expected privacy, as the Ministry of Environment confirmed. And it doesn't matter if you go inside the dwelling house or not, that's not relevant. Even just by looking or inspecting from the outside, it's still an inspection of a dwelling house. And it's really important to get this conceptually right, because when not, then it will be an infringement of private property rights, and it will be trespassing under the Trespass Act, and it will be violation of the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act. And now we have the question, given this background that we have seen so many enforcement actions against unconsented dwellings, the question is, how often did council actually use the search warrant to perform their enforcement action according to law? And here's the statistic for the last 10 years. There was one search warrant in 2014, one in 2016, one in 2018, another one in 2021, and 5 search warrants last year. So in total, we had 9 search warrants over the last 10 years, and we don't even know if they are related to unconsented dwelling. This number, only 9 search warrants, is quite frankly is shocking because it's so low. Because we know that there have been dozens and dozens of enforcement actions against people living in unconsented dwellings over the last 10 years. So, I mean, how does it all make sense? I mean, the question is, how is it possible without a massive infringement of private property rights and civil liberties that there were only 9 search warrants, but so many inspections of unconsented dwellings? I cannot see it. I simply cannot see how this was legally possible. And that's why I'm here today. And I would like to see from this committee, number one, make sure when council does an inspection of an unconsented dwelling or a dwelling house, that there's always a search warrant used because it's required by law. And the second point is, I would like to see an internal investigation in council. How was it possible that we had so many enforcement actions against people living in unconsented dwellings with such a low number of search warrants? How was it legally possible? And then please make it public when you find out, because I would like to have an answer to this. I really would like to have an answer to this question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for asking for something specific, and there'll be a response will come to you, I'm sure. Any clarifying questions? Yes, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Shepherd, can you just quote the case law? So the case that you quoted 20 years ago.
Yeah, it was in, I can send it to you by email, but it was 2003 High Court in Auckland. I think it was Wellington Council against Waikato Council, but I can send you the email with I have the whole court case. I can send it to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Anything further from anybody? Thank you. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
coming in today. Welcome board member Knowles to the meeting. Any declarations of interest relating to today's kaupapa or agenda? Councillor Kinnemont?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, I've got a declaration. Resource consent, manager's report, Mapua boat ramp.
Thank you. Nothing further? We've got some minutes to confirm that the minutes of the Environment and Regulatory Committee meeting held on Thursday, the 23rd of November 23 be confirmed as a true and correct record of the meeting. Somebody happy to move that? Thank you, Councillor Ellis, seconded by Councillor Butler. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. And that the confidential minutes of the Environment and Regulatory Committee meeting held on Thursday, the 23rd of November 23 be confirmed as a true and correct record of the meeting. Move Councillor Dowler.
Yep.
Seconded by Councillor Maru. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. We've got 5 reports in front of us today. And the first is from our Group Manager, Kim Drummond. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take my report as read, just add a couple of comments to that. I'm opening up there with some commentary around some new staff, some key figures that have joined the senior leadership group within the environmental assurance. So one of those is Shane Bruins. He's not here in the audience today. He's actually over in Ireland getting his assisting his daughter to get married. So we have Carl Cheeseman standing in for him at the moment. The second one is our Harbour Master, Peter Renshaw, who is with us. So there's Peter in the back of the room. As noted, in due course, Peter will be coming to the committee with a full report on the activities of the Harbour Master, and we'll do that twice a year so you can get a better direct feel for what's happening in his world, and there's plenty happening. I'd also like to add to the fact that we've got Jodie Connor, my executive assistant for the environmental assurance group with us today. So she's another direct report to me who's new to the team. So just by way of introductions. In terms of the notes that I've got there on government direction, one of the things I signalled was that we were likely to see a fast track consenting bill introduced to the House at the time of writing. That has indeed happened. And just to let councillors know that staff are looking to pull together views from across the wider staff groups through our policy team, and they'll obviously be working through with the council in terms of pulling a submission together on that in the very short space of time that the government has allowed for select committee submissions. And finally, just I did end on a few little tweaks there on pest management. It's just a couple of points that are happening, but the more substantive report on that comes through with the environmental information report, which will talk to the fact that we've got a review underway of our regional pest management plan. So that'll come through when Rob gets to talk to you towards the end of this agenda. But apart from that, yeah, take my report as read and happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Kim. In terms of the legislation with fast track consenting, there's going to be a schedule, wasn't there, attached to that with some consents or proposals or something on, but that wasn't included. Have we got any signals about when that's likely to be seen?
So I think with the way the bill reads at the moment is that rather than actually declare those in a schedule that was attached to the bill, it's created a capability for ministers to add particular projects to a schedule. So that's therefore it talks to the process that we follow to identify those particular projects. Initially, the bill was thought to contain those projects, and indeed this council had provided some thoughts as to what could be on such a schedule in the preliminary stages, because the government did ask for that, but that hasn't actually transpired. So the way the bill's structured now and going through select committee, it talks about a schedule rather than says what's on it.
Thank you for that clarification. Deputy Mayor Brian, is that what that says? Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For you to the manager, just in relation to the freshwater farm plans, Kim, is there any update since the writing of the report, or any change, or any signs on the horizon of when we might get an order in council and give us some clear direction?
Through the chair on that one, it's pretty much as I wrote in the report. Actually, that's the lie of the land. But the signals we did get is there is unlikely to be any orders in council that will add further regions to the list of going live. And next cab off the rank was due to be Marlborough, and they've essentially been suggested to them by officials that they stand down. Really? Because the government is going to just reflect and just what they're wanting to assure themselves is the framework that is there is in fact best. The best fitting framework. It doesn't mean that the regions that are turned live and do have obligations for farm plans to switch off. They're still progressing, and some regions are actually of the view that they're that far advanced that they should actually go live anyway, because they can choose to. This region is the sense from the staff is that it would be better for everything to land in a nice sweet package. We're working with farmers. We know that farm plans are part of our future, but to get to the point that they're dialed in nicely with a new national policy statement for freshwater is preferable, because then we can say when it actually becomes a requirement, precisely what farmers are expected to do or not to do. So we feel that we're making momentum towards this. It's a key part of what we see as the future, but waiting a little bit for the specifications not necessarily a bad thing.
Thank you. Any
I
indicative,
can add to it. Yeah, Merca's in the audience now, so she can jump up and add to that conversation.
Anything to add, Mirka?
well, I
Okay.
just have one further, and Merca might cover this. So indicatively, we've been told 2025, haven't we?
We were working to an indicative timeframe, and yes, that's when we were working towards. With the kicking out of the national policy statement for fresh water, the potential is for it to be a little bit after that that would suit us best.
Councillor Butler and then Councillor Mayling and then Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to just pick up on something with the fast track consenting bill, and it may be that we don't know this, but just from the some of the rhetoric that's been coming out about projects, can we be confident that projects that have already been through the consenting process, may have been through the Environment Court, maybe at an appeal stage, are projects like that, do you think there's a possibility that they may actually make it into this fast track process? Or is it actually projects that have not started down that track? Because you know, we could be in the situation where projects that have already been refused or greatly modified with a lot of conditions could actually be re-looked at by this fast track process. And I just wondered through if there's any indication through the regional councils group about the risk of that happening.
I think the answer to that is that we can't be certain of anything at this point in time, that there's quite a wide field being opened up by what could go and end up on a schedule. There's no, inside view that there are particular projects that are halfway through that are going to be picked up and caught up in that sort of approach. And the general views is there's things that are in front of us that ought to be fast tracked as opposed to things that we're currently dealing with. But because we're, dealing with a bill that's currently before the Select Committee, we're going to expect that folk will advance their thoughts on a whole range of things. And I would be pretty confident that people that are in that situation might see the benefits of being included into a fast tracking approach. So I'm sure the Select Committee will hear representations from people who think current projects could be added to that schedule, but precisely where that lands, firstly through the Select Committee and then secondly through the government is a little bit of that unknown for us.
You may have heard the commentary in the media around mining sands up north, and those that fought against that went to High Court, was turned down, and dismayed now that it may be that people can resubmit and go through fast track. I guess that's what's you're hearing as well. Thank you. Councillor Mayling.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and question, maybe a comment from Mr. Drummond in relation to the Dry Weather Task Force that he's chaired, and I think this is about the 21st or 22nd year that I've attended it in different roles. And one, I think we should celebrate that the Waimea does not have restrictions now because we're releasing water, and the Kainui Dam is doing its job as well. But the concern is the Moutere zone and the stress that those farmers are under, because they've had 65% cuts for 3-4 weeks now. And the question for you is, going forward, what's the level of compliance? Because there's a concern that, and we've had it in the past, that people don't comply when restrictions get really tough. And there's a lot of income at stake. And the other question is, the unknown damage to that aquifer going forward. So if you could comment on those for me, thank you. And it's not an easy job chairing that task force either.
Through the chair. Yes, it's I guess you'll appreciate it's been my first year of chairing but we had a sort of a slight run last year, but this year it's full on action. And I guess from a staff perspective, it's it's really obvious that the decisions we're making there have real impacts for people and on people's lives, and that's understood. But also the other side of the ledger, that really that Dry Weather Task Force is for the benefit of the rivers and the water systems that we're there to regulate. So that's our primary focus, but recognising that it does have social flow on impacts. So that's the I guess the primary point of my response. The second one is that we're going to learn a lot in the wash up for this, because I think the Mutare situation is never been sort of envisaged. What we're dealing with at the moment is something that's not really hasn't got any precedent, and so there's going to need to be quite a considerable examination of where we've landed and why we got there, post season. So in the first instance, we've got to get through to that point that we are able to then review. So that's a live issue, and I know our environmental information staff are keenly following the track and trying to figure out what the cause is for some of these observations that they're making. In terms of the compliance, it is quite a sort of an impost for those who are operating under consent conditions who were hoping that those consent conditions would last them through their whole production line, and they're having to deal with the fact that the allocations they have are changing mid-season. And so that does come with some compliance challenges. So suffice to say that I'll leave it there. There have been some infringement notices issued when they are dealing with problems that are in that infringement zone, but there are also investigations underway with regard to compliance at a more serious level. So those are matters that we can't comment on any further, but certainly it's not plain sailing in the compliance space. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor McKenzie, then Councillor Kinnemont.
Thank you very, very much, Chair. It's been mentioned in Mr. Drummond's report about the Waimea Community Dam, and look, I would just like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the fantastic news that water has been able to be released from the Waimea Community Dam and the lifting of the water restrictions for those downstream. I want to acknowledge the vision and commitment of all parties who work together to actually make this project happen. I want to acknowledge the leadership of the previous Mayor, Richard Kempthorne, and then particularly our current Mayor, Mayor King. I mean, it's fantastic, the leadership that they have shown to make this project happen. And I also want to acknowledge the work of the CEO of Waimea Water Limited, Mike Scott, who has provided the leadership to actually get the dam constructed. This is a legacy asset, and it's going to help ensure that our region thrives into the future. And so I just think that, that point has happened and we can gloss over it and move on, but I just want us to take the time to acknowledge the huge significance of what has been achieved for the region. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kinnemont.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Page 10 of your report, Mr. Drummond. Clauses 7.2, 7.3, dangerous dams policy. It seems as though this policy is reliant on the honesty of the dam owners to come forth with their about the dam they have in their property. What is it? Do you know what the council's role is going to be in? Is it going to be reactive or proactive enforcing this register? If some people are going to ignore and wait for people to walk up on their property and say your dam is unsafe. Is our role going to be reactive and just enforcing the law, or are we going to be proactively going out and seeking to have a look at these dams that fit into this category?
Through the chair on that one, and my group manager Matt Fairley might be able to add a more definitive explanation. But effectively, the dangerous dams policy identifies dams of a certain size as needing to have special attention, and it's basically setting that up that the owners of those dams have a series of obligations that they must comply with. And that provides the information to allow the assessment that the level of their danger they represent is being managed. The compliance aspect in the first instance is making sure that information is provided. So there will be an obligation on them doing that, and we actively monitor against that. And then the second thing is an assessment as to whether what they've putting in place is actually managing the effect. And so there's a sort of a follow-on based on risk as to how we would then deal with those folk. That is then paving the way for the dam safety regulations, which are a broader initiative which has been signalled for a couple of years and is due to come into effect May this year, which assumes every council has a dangerous dams policy. What we're signalling is that this council had made progress towards one but never landed it. And so what we need to in the first instance do is land that. That'll be brought in front of councillors and at that point you'll get a real sense for what the framework that is actually setting up. And it's going to require council authorisation for that policy approach. And I think the sort of questions you're asking now will be relevant questions to be asked at the time that policy is put in front of you. Anything more to add to that, Matt? Yeah, okay.
Anything further? Oh, yes, Councillor Maru.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Happy to move.
Oh, okay. I've got a couple of things. So in terms of the marine farm consents, and there's a move to extend the consent durations. Have you got any lowdown on that? Like with that, it's hard to imagine that could happen without there being some assessment of current conditions and then what conditions might be going through for however long our co-governing government want to extend those to.
Yes, that was as you would detect from the commentary, that was a rather unusual one that it appeared with a very short turnaround time. And most of that turnaround time that we had was actually taken up by getting time with officials to explain to us what they thought was actually in play. So I think if you to that week, we found out on Thursday a little bit more of the detail, and then staff had to turn that around into a response back to government, which was due lunchtime on the Monday. And I think we, moved heaven and earth and we got it later on that afternoon on Monday. At the same time, the regional sector were looking to have a more, I guess, a macro response. And they likewise did the work to ask the very questions that you've just posed, because in their minds, this had us signals of not necessarily, covering all the bases and managing all the risks. So that view has now been, has landed back with the officials, because it was the officials who are asking this question. Precisely what they're doing with it, we don't know yet. My suggestion to you in the report was this may have been a quick bit of consultation, such that the government could consider this in the fast track consenting context, that they've done some preliminary checking and then they will either advance it or not advance it in the context of that. That's my sort of thoughts on how it will go. But other than that, it currently sits with the officials at the moment with those very questions being asked. The sense is that a lot of those consents that are coming up for renewal, some of them are deemed to be in the wrong place and they're having environmental effects that are not being well managed. So to add 25 years onto that would not necessarily seem, in our view, to be a good thing to do. And yet slightly shifting those farms into a better spot might be a better outcome, for the farmers and for the environment. So those things have been raised by us and by the regional sector more generally, precisely where this lands is in one of those unknown spaces for us.
Are you thinking that the business about perhaps some farms aren't in the right place would relate to our district?
Not necessarily so, because most of our district has had its farms reconsented in recent times. So we're not necessarily of the view that farms are obviously wrongly cited. There's 12 in the mix that we haven't gone through that level of consideration for. So I wouldn't like to, speculate as to whether they are or aren't. But of those 12, a good bunch of them are in that Wainui Bay spat catching sites. And that is something that the industry needs to reapply for by the middle of this year. So they'll be under the current system. So they'll be obviously very keen to establish whether they need to do that or not.
Yeah.
So we're in that sort of twilight zone where we're just trying to figure out whether or not we're going to be managing those through the standard process or whether some intervention is put in place that takes it out of our hands.
Because mid-year's not so far away, is it? And that's
right.
the farms there in Wainui are a critical bit of infrastructure for certainly our district and nationally.
Yeah.
And I note in 4.21 that you've approached Aquaculture New Zealand and the Marine Farming Association and an iwi Aquaculture Organisation to present to our committee. So I think that'll be helpful for us. It's sort of a bit unseen, isn't it, until there's truckloads of mussels running through the district. Or you've got a really flat day out there at the port in Tarakohe, you can see the farms, but it's a bit of an unseen thing. But there's a lot going on, and I think it'd be great to hear from these folk to come in and maybe update us. Thank you for your report. Appreciate particularly the updates around the unknowns, really, isn't it? It's a bit difficult to report on those things. We've got a mover to receive your report, and Councillor Maru, a seconder. Please, Councillor Mackenzie. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. We're going to move to the Resource Consent Manager's report. Annie, welcome.
Just have a brief word of introduction.
Yes.
Yeah. So just before Annie kicks off, so Annie is stepping in for Katrina. Katrina's on a week's leave at the moment, and so Annie is her fill-in, and she knows this report back to front. So welcome, Annie.
Thank you. Through the chair, if you could please take this report as read. There are a few highlights I would like to point out for you. We have made real good progress over this 6-month period. Particularly with recruitment, we've managed to recruit a senior planner in the natural resources team, which is the first time we've got a senior for quite some time. So that's really good. Also, the cost of using contractors is breaking even this period for the first time in quite a long time, rather than making a loss. So that's an improvement. Also, although service request numbers have increased from about 1,200 to 1,500 over the period, our overdue list has reduced significantly as well. So that's also good. And the trend for discount penalties to double each period has been arrested. So that's a massive bonus. That's the highlights.
Thank you. Great report, a lot of information in there, and I'm sure councillors appreciate seeing that level of detail and to understand the improvements that have been made. A lot of work over quite a long period to try and shift what's happening in that area, in your team's area. Many other councils are no doubt have been suffering in the same way due to difficulty in recruiting staff. Any questions or comments in terms of this report? Councillor Mayling, and then Councillor Deputy Mayor Bryant.
Well, I'd firstly like to say it's really pleasing to see the progress, and hopefully some senior planners will become available further with the reductions in the people that have been pinched from local government to central government with the 6.5% savings that have to happen. But I just wanted, when I read during the report, and I can't find where I marked it, I saw that you'd had about 7 hearings with commissioners alone in that last 6 months. Now, I've had the privilege of sitting as a second commissioner with an independent commissioner on an occasion in the last term, and I know the Deputy Mayor, and I think Councillor Hill has as well. I'd just encourage you to do that because, one, it's ideal training for councillors, and also councillors bring that local knowledge. And I can think of one consent where we didn't have one, and maybe the local knowledge wasn't there. So I'd just encourage that it's possible. I know it's an added cost to the consent applicant, but it's part of our role as councillors. And we used to do an awful lot of hearings, and it's really valuable to sit alongside a really experienced commissioner and to be the less experienced person. Like I've done about, I don't know, probably 10 or 12 consents in the time I've been on council. And I think it adds to your experience, and the local knowledge adds as well. So that's just a plug from me.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Brian.
Madam Chair, I did have a written question. Was Annie provided with that, or has someone got related to the Upper Motueka water consents?
Through the chair, so the two outstanding objections are RM 18-1000 and 180991. They are both still outstanding objections because they indicated they wanted to be heard at a hearing. So as part of that process, we'll indicate a cost to them, and they have never come back to us. So we have followed up with them and also their consultant, but we've not heard anything. The intention is to after May, when the current harvest irrigation season is over, that we'll have another push to get those finalised.
For you, it's been some considerable time, so they're in limbo, but in no hurry, I guess, because they can use what they've currently been allocated, as I understand it.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right.
So,
They are also now number one on the objections priority list, so they'll be the first one to be looked at.
Then I just have a further one about the report, just about the volume of consent application. I'm reading at 1.4 now, and now you're down to 37. At the time of writing, obviously, 37 unallocated consents. What do we need to resolve that issue? Is that more planners on the ground, more consultants?
Yeah, both really. It has slowed a little bit more since then, so that number is looking a bit more healthy. But yeah, I think that getting the experienced planners and the experienced contractors, we put a lot of time and effort into getting contractors and weeding out the ones that aren't quite as good as perhaps they look to be on paper. So that is improving all the time. Yeah.
And then just a further question. I'm not sure of all councils, but some councillors have sent a list of council approved consents. Previously, it used to be applications and approved consents. And I'm not sure this is a question for you or for Linda, who does that. Just wondered why the list of applications had been stopped. Yeah. It's yeah. We get a list of the applications, you're right, but we don't get a result of the ones that have been released, for the want of a better word.
Through the chair, there's definitely that list is still around, so I can look into why you're not getting that and
That'd be
get back to you on that.
Through the chair, we get the applications, but we don't get the approvals. Whereas in the last term, we used to get the applications and the approvals.
Correct, yeah.
The decisions made. you mean?
Decision,
Yeah. So I'm still getting that. But, yes. So just a bit of inconsistency there maybe around. It sure does. And we don't disclose the most advantageous advantages.
And I guess, if I may, the advantage is that we can see the applications coming in and what's going out. So that gives us a bit of a feel for what the trend is. Because obviously there's more coming in than going out, and has been for some time on a weekly basis.
Thank you. Anything further?
No.
Okay, thanks. So there'll be a little tidy up around just checking that each councillor is receiving the decision schedule as well. Okay. Thank you. In terms of the, I just want in the chart here, just trying to find that. Non-notified consent, July to December, table 1, page 16. I just see the percentage within time, subdivisions at 30. Is that to do with, is that generally to do with the complexity that subdivision applications might have, or something else?
Yeah, it's partly the complexity, but also it can be the size, or they're often bundled. So it's quite common that they have a lower completion.
Yeah. So mostly the bundled nature of that.
Yeah,
process.
the smaller ones can be quite quick and easy to get through, whereas the larger ones, there'll be a lot of complexity that will often be difficult in 20 days.
Yeah. And oh, I had something else. Just pleasing, just the improvements. I know that, you know, Katrina and the team have been working away very hard, and I think with support wider within the organisation around really trying to catch up. It's been very stressful. I know it's been very stressful, and it certainly helps when there's less consents coming in to be able to sort of catch up a bit. But some of the things that you've been doing to help the whole system around it, it's really gratifying to see some of the you know, the benefits are coming through, or the effect of what you've been looking to shift, particularly the bit about the contractors. So sort of that's really pleasing that you've been able to I was going to say weed out, but that's not really going to say, be discerning around who we're engaging, who's being engaged, and where we're getting efficiency from. That's very helpful. And the coordination throughout our wider council system, the more that we're able to improve those sort of processes, that's very pleasing from a governance perspective. Councillor Butler.
Yeah, just along those lines, it's nice to see that Dugald Lay's length of service has been acknowledged here, and that he's leaving council. And I've always found Dugald to be a very helpful and approachable staff member, which I'm sure that everyone else would agree with. So just like to acknowledge that. And just my other question was just around the, actually, is it in this report to do with building consents? This one?
Next one.
Next one, that's right. That's right. Yes, so thanks. That's it for me.
Thank you. Are you happy to move that we receive the report?
It's happy to.
Thank you, and seconded by Councillor Dowler. Thank you, Annie, and oh, Councillor McKenzie.
Sorry, Chair, I thought I was on your list.
Oh, you are now. Off you go.
Thank you very much for your report, and goodness me, Katrina's come here report after report giving us the bad news, and when it's the good news she's not. Maybe she's just a bad news person, doesn't want to be here for the good news. But anyway, it's really heartening to see the progress that's been made. And, you know, we've got to credit it maybe not just to the drop off or whatever in numbers, but actually the work you're doing behind the scenes around your systems and processes. So that's fantastic. My actual question is about paragraph 8.3, which is to do with the consent for the Mapua boat ramp. It basically says in the report, independent and accredited commissioners with the right experience are currently being considered, and a panel will be appointed should this application proceed to a hearing. So I just wanted to understand a little bit more. Is there a possibility that there wouldn't be a hearing?
I think, through the chair, I think that at this point they have to be quite vague in what they're saying, because it's not far enough in to say anything definite. Yeah, that's my understanding of the wording of that. Yeah, if that's enough.
Okay, well, look, I'll leave it there. Maybe it is a bit of a early on in the process. By reading the word should, I was kind of like, oh, well, is there a possibility that it wouldn't? Otherwise, we would just say before it proceeds to a hearing.
Thank you at this stage. Yeah. Hasn't been processed further enough down the track, I imagine, to be able to say definitively yes, there'll be a hearing, or yeah. Yes,
Or maybe my subsequent question might be, as councillors, how do we get advised of when hearings are scheduled and when they take place? So that if we as, might just want to sit in on a hearing, how would we even know when a hearing was occurring?
Through the chair, that's a good question. I'll get back to you on that. I know it's on our website, but I don't know whether anyone gets direct emails, but I'll give you some feedback on that shortly.
And through the chair, I think that's something where we could pick up directly and make sure that when, because hearings are not exactly, happening every day, that I think from your suggestions there, we could actually make a habit of letting councillors know that a hearing has been set and the dates, etc. Yeah.
might pop up on the weekly update schedule of what we're doing. If someone was involved in it, I suppose would be the only tag we'd see. But if none of us were, then we wouldn't see it there. Anything further? We've got to move, haven't we, in a seconder? You've got that, Rachel? Thank you. I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you, Annie. Please pass on to the team just our real, genuine appreciation for the stress you've been under, what you've worked through, the improvements that are being made. We know it's still not so easy, but genuinely very appreciated. Thank you.
Make sure Katrina hears all those too.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Let's go with the next report. Matt, Board Insurance Managers Report. Welcome.
Morning all. Through you, Madam Chair. So my report is read. I'll just talk about a couple of things. You'll see from it there's quite a decline in building consent applications, which has been a little challenging. There's a lot of, staff are having to do a bit more intensive training, get them upskilled, different areas. The contractor spend is still quite high, but it has decreased. All the commercial consents are going out to them. We don't have any commercial processes in-house. So yeah, we're just able to do all the residential in-house, which is good with the competency levels that have increased. We have had trouble with recruitment in the past 12 months, I guess, trying to find competent people. So currently we're putting that on hold because of the downturn, and that should be able to keep the guys busy enough to continue the way they're going. We've had 5 staff complete their diploma, so that will free them up as well and give them a few extra skills. I think they're pretty much the main issues, main challenges is keeping everyone busy around these tough times, and hopefully things will pick up. Any questions?
Thanks, Matt. Councillor Butler.
You. So you make a mention of the financial model not suiting you, not having a rising or a really robust number of applications for building consents. Is that something that you would be able to expand on and just explain? Is that so you're financially dependent on having an increasing number of consent applications coming through, and so when those drop, this affects?
Yes. Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, that's we rely 87% of our funding comes through building consents applications. So with that decline, and I guess the forecast, I guess we didn't quite get the forecast right, and that's the main issue is with the intel that we had and financial reviews and bits and pieces. It appeared that we were going to get a lot more through the door than expected. So that's where it's, I guess, not fit for purpose, as in forecasting didn't quite nail it.
So it's a bit insecure.
Yeah.
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 And then I just had another question, quite a small one. I mean, I think it's great you've got no complaints, so that's really good, isn't it? That happy. With the shift to people purchasing existing houses and then the applications for renovations, is that putting an undue strain on your service? Because I would imagine that consents for renovations could be quite time consuming and quite demanding at times.
Yes, they are. They're complicated. They don't generate, they don't bring in as much money as what a building, for a new dwelling would generate. But it is time tracked, so we charge the actual time used to do that. So it's not extra strain. Like it actually keeps them busy. So it's definitely not too much of a challenge.
Financially, it doesn't
Financially,
contribute as much
not.
as a new build.
No. So the new dwellings were they were bringing in the money, and there's been a huge decline. I think it's 40% since 2020. So hopefully they're going to pick up. It sounds like they will sort of around end of this year, early next year, but it's a bit of a guessing game at the moment. I think it's quite hard to get a good forecast out there. I have got haven't had a chance to read it yet, but there's a National Construction Pipeline report that's come out, and that's forecasts out to 2028. So I need to have a look at that and do a bit of a forecast for the next financial year, and hopefully that'll bring things right. Hopefully.
Thank you, Councillor Maru, and then Councillor Mayland.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks for that. So in terms of your current team, is there any training or opportunities to upskill them to undertake commercial, or is that just in a no realm area?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, there is, but it's now is a good opportunity to get the ones that have got the low competency levels of like a residential 1 and get them up into the 2s and 3s but getting into commercial can take quite some time, and it's quite expensive. So at the moment, my plan is just to continue using contractors doing the commercial work, because it's trying to retain staff. Every time we get someone into the commercial space, they leave. So it's quite difficult. So what we're going to try and do is get competent people coming in, some commercial processors and inspectors coming in, so we don't have to train them because they want to be here. The others, they could be here just as a training ground, and off they go. But things are pretty quiet in the contractor world at the moment. So I have heard of a few wanting to come back into councils, but the money that they want is not even close to what we can offer. So it's quite difficult.
And then the only, because it's a reflective and straight to the point report. But the message I can't keep losing track of is we maybe have the resource and we haven't got work to keep people busy. And every other report I read is the opposite. We're resource poor, we need more staff. So in terms of swimming pools, made heaps of progress on. Are there other areas of focus that may not have had focus that's repurposed? And I know it won't meet budget, but is there key bits? I guess the bit I'm asking, finances aside, have you got a plan to keep your team busy?
Yes.
And employed, or is there another conversation?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, we have. We've got we're going to have 2 building inspectors go into the compliance space where they can do the building warrant and fitness warrant audits. That'll keep them busy, and we are looking at using other councils, seeing if they need any help. So there's quite a few avenues there that we could try, but so far not successful with other councils. Inspectors will be a little bit more difficult, but if we have the 2 in with the compliance, that'll pretty much solve most of our problems. So it's only a couple of people.
We won't have people twiddling their thumbs.
Oh, no, definitely not. No, and the thing is, there will be a little bit of training involved in that for the inspectors to go and do the building warrant audits. That'll free up some other areas in the compliance team as well if we're doing that.
Right.
Because obviously the pools and compliance schedules and certificates of public use and COAs, there's a lot of work in there, but that's why we've put the recruitment on hold because, yeah, there is no one out there and we have got staff we can move around.
Great.
Yeah.
Councillor Mayling?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for your report. It's a good news and a bad news report.
Yeah.
So, to me, there's some good news in there, and particularly on the table on page 30, is that processing time for new consents 8 days?
Yes.
Well, that is considerably better than our neighbouring council because it's 20 days over there, 20 working days, because I've heard family member building just over the border, and every time they do a change, it's 20 days. So, you know, you should be really proud of that and your team in relation to that. And I have been one of your customers in the past when I've did an alteration at home, and I couldn't speak highly enough of the staff.
Yeah, no.
And you know, there's good and bad news. This will pick up again.
Yeah, and this is the whole idea of retaining the staff that we have to
But
just
the fact that the service you're providing, you're turning something around in 8 working days is absolutely fantastic. When you look at our near neighbours, it's taking 20 days. So
yeah,
I think there's some very good stuff in here as well. And it shows you being innovative in repurposing some staff. And I commend you for that as well. Thank you.
And given how pleased you are you happy to move the report?
Of course, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Yes, I've got a comment from Kim.
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. The point that I just refer you back to is the macro analysis that I included in my the GM report. So what we're hearing from the consent skies is, you know, the world that's going on there. What we've got from the building side is the activity there, and both of them have projected an uplift, and inevitably it must happen because the forces of more people coming into the country and less houses being built, you know, they'll switch. The projections that Matt has made is that things could start to uplift in later this year. So that Matt's working towards the idea that we need to maintain the capacity for low demand and it'll start to pick up. The macro analysis that John's team has done for us suggests that maybe there'll be a bit of a lag in that not perhaps to bank on the uplift being later this year, but maybe a lag of potentially 6 months because you've got to get the land consented in order for the building to take place. And so if those two things are lined up, we may be looking to live with a situation for maybe 12 months before we can realistically start to be a push. And what Matt is very keen to do is not lose the capability that he's built in that team. And so we're switching roles to help. And that's somewhat challenging because staff who have used to be doing one thing and being asked to do something else. But what I'd say from a group manager perspective is the willingness of this team to dig in and make things better is outstanding. And it also speaks to them at the moment with the building renovations. This is the team that has been most impacted about moving here, there and everywhere. And it's incredible indictment on their attitude and the culture of that group that they've taken that on the chin and, deploying themselves in different ways. So, I think Matt's got a really motivated team here, knowing that we've got a financial challenge at the moment that we're in the middle of, and it's not pretty when we're reporting at that level, but the attitude of the team and the desire to overcome this adversity, I think is really something that comes through. And I think you might have seen that a little bit in the report. You're seeing there's a good story underpinning the challenging times here.
Nicely framed, thank you. Is somebody happy to second the report? Councillor Ellis. Just can I just check, Matt, in terms of the 5 general non-compliances?
Oh yeah.
In terms of the reassessment, what do they relate to?
They were reasons for decisions. Yeah, because we've got to obviously make really good reasons record really good reasons for decisions. I don't know, CCC clock. Actually, I can't even remember off the top of my head. Sorry, but we have cleared 2 of them. There's another 3 to go.
Yeah.
But we should have those results. 22nd of March, I think they've got to get them back to us. What were those other? They're very minor,
Yeah.
like, I don't know, there was one where we were checking our thermometers incorrectly. Yeah, it was pretty much a 5-minute fix. So they're just very, very minor issues, bit of wording.
Great.
Yeah, so
It's-
pretty basic stuff actually.
Yes, I imagine that, but it's good to hear that.
Yeah. So it was a really, really good result for us. So get these other couple cleared and continue accreditation, and we continue with 2 yearly audits.
Great. Well done. And appreciate your report. And it's, the section 15 expectations for the first 6 months of this year. I really like that in the report, just sort of laying out what you're going to be continuing to do. It's really nicely framed. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to put the resolution to receive your report. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thanks, Matt.
Great. Thank you.
A break for a cup of tea for 15 minutes. Back at 5 past by that clock. Thank you. Before we go to Rob's report, we're just going to hear from John in response to questions around the fast track consenting process about council's interest in that. What projects or proposals or suggestions is what I'm looking for. Thanks, John.
Sorry, team, just give us two seconds. I just need to pull up my list. So we were written to by the minister, Mr. Bishop, and we probably had about, as usual, 40 seconds to reply to it. So we pulled a team together and we sort of brainstormed the types of things that we, at a broad scale, what we really need to focus on to move the needle with the region. So we focused on, and I'll be really quick on this, some key projects. So this is where we landed was joint landfill, Bork Creek, support for the Wakefield Village development. That's there's about 320 homes in Wakefield, which we put through to the minister. We also talked about the support for Bell Island Solar Farm. and some broader stuff around fast track zoning. So, you know, we have to go through quite a lot of process, especially with zoning. So how do we speed that up to move quicker? And the final thing, we actually talked about council consenting processes, you know, the improvements we could see when the RMA reform process is going through. And we did quite a lot of work around looking at actually what would move us quicker. We provided some advice around what we could see in terms of the current legislation we operate under, what can move, you know, what changes could be made. What didn't we want to lose from the RMA reform thinking that was really good? And so we put those forward. So I've only got the draft in front of me, and it was signed off by Tim, met Tim a while ago. So we'll get the final draft and flick it out if you want. But primarily that was what we were aiming to do, some specific projects, but some higher level strategic projects.
Thank you. That's helpful to know. It'll be a balance. I imagine that we'll want to show integrity, that if we can get some fast track consenting, that we are attending to all the other matters that we need to around each of those projects in terms of environmental and social matters.
There's probably one thing, sorry, through you, Chair, there's one thing I probably just to close the loop was, this was council's response. The developers can also, as you know, enter that process and bring their own thinking through. So in terms of specific projects, and we talked about one just over a cup of tea, was that this doesn't hinder the developer from going through the select committee process.
Thank you.
I'm not sure, for you, Madam Chair, John, if you're in a position to answer questions, but just in relation to the landfill, there's a number of potential consents there that could be, and bearing in mind we're in open meeting, you may want to tell me offline just if it's all or some or what they are.
The only commentary is here is 2 future projects.
That narrows it down slightly, but yeah, that's helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. That's good just to have a little outline of those proposals. Rob, we'll go to your Rivers and Coastal Structures report. Thank you. Welcome.
Kia ora, rangatira mā. So I'll take the report as read, and if it's okay, I just want to highlight a couple of things. And I'll apologise now. The props worked so well last time that I've asked one of the staff to drop a prop in as soon as the courier arrives. But so if it arrives, I'll let you know. So in the rivers space, the first thing I'd really like to say is, while I've put this together, I'm just the latest on this path. So I would really like to acknowledge David Arsenault and David Stevenson, because they've been really awesome in this space. So David Stevenson, I used to sit in his space, and David Arsenault, who's actually a river engineer when he was in Canada, have been really supportive.
It's a crocodile.
Oh, all right. It was all right. Could I talk about those? Yeah. So, yeah. So this is the next report. Can they wait like half a minute?
Yeah, yes, you are.
All right. Yeah, that's all right. All right. Yeah. So yes, this is to try and hurry up the first report, because you'll be busting to see what's in there. Yeah, no, I'd really like to acknowledge the 2 Davids if I can. And it's actually working really well at the moment. A lot of the work that I'm doing around Royal We are doing around the pathway and getting all the background information. A lot of it I'm able to get David Arsenault, because he knows what he's talking about in the river space, to actually line up with Tonkin and Taylor and the contractors. He speaks their language, which I don't. So it's working really well. I'd really like to acknowledge that. The other thing, so since I put the report in, we've actually had that meeting at Maraho. And the good news is out there that our sand push-up, so generally our way of managing erosion on a beach is always to try and do sand push-ups and plantings rather than hard rock. Hard rock just makes the beach even worse, and it just kicks the can down the road for another decade or so. The sand push-ups are working really well. Wakatu, we met with them out there. They are happy with the way it's working. So for the next 4 years, we'll continue with the once or twice a year sand push-ups out there. And this will come back in the next LTP to the council budget if we have to do anything structurally out there. We were anticipating doing some structural intervention if necessary, but we don't need to. So it's a really good news story. When I talk about nursery, I just talk about our one nursery, but what we're actually doing along the river, and this is our contractor being quite proactive as well, is we have these little things called micro nurseries. So if you go up to that on Motueka, we actually have a little nursery up there of Matsudana willows that we can use locally. The interesting thing is when you go to Golden Bay, willows do not do very well in Golden Bay for some reason. So we will look for a really healthy variety and start a micro nursery in Golden Bay as well. And that's essentially taking the poles, planting them out, and then within a few years, we'll be able to start harvesting them. And just in that section 10, I talk about the future work that we're doing. What David asked, we talked about it last night. So we're going to kick off that river fairway work now. There's still a little bit of money in the budget for the planning side of the rivers work. So we're going to kick that off now. So where I talk about some of our future work, we're actually kicking that off now. Yes, sorry. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Councillor Mailing and then Deputy Mayor Bryant, thank you.
Rob, thanks for your report and the discussions I've had with you over the last couple of weeks. So I'll talk about cameras on rivers. So will we get some progress, because we've got some serious fly tipping in particular areas, and then the dumping of fill within the river burn on the Waimea River that really concerns me, because where it will end up when we get a decent flush in the winter, because it's inside the stop banks. So I know you've got a timeline, and I have the photos here, but I can't get that email working yet, but I'll go upstairs and this afternoon to get them to you. But cameras on rivers, will we have some more of that? And I know I think you're working with Luke Crawford in that area. Yeah, I think it's Luke. He's a retired police sergeant. Another one. There's lots of us around.
Through the chair, if I could respond to that. Yes, the photo that, and I will make sure that I could put them into the Friday updates maybe. It's clearly not trailer loads. This is clearly contractors dumping on our river berm. There's a broader issue right around the country around waste. It has got hard to get rid of tricky waste. And we still have, on the berms, we have a lot of soil from the last flooding event. So, and it's a lot. It's not just one or two piles. It's a lot of piles, which are our council problem. And what's happening is, it's that graffiti attracts other graffiti. It's the same thing. We're getting contractors dumping out there. We will try and catch them. There are cameras around there, and we will do something about it. It makes me a little bit grumpy, and it is so deliberate, and the ratepayer picks this up. So unless we can get someone caught in the act, the ratepayer pays for this, and which is just not fair. It's the same issue with the dumping of carcasses. I think there's at least 3 being dumped in the last quarter. It's such terrible behaviour. I'm assuming none of you would think twice about digging a hole to bury some remains, and yet some people think it's okay to just back the ute up and biff it, and it's disgusting. So we really want to get on some of that, and it's yeah.
Deputy Mayor Bryan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For you, thank you, Rob, for the report. Very detailed as usual. Just going to take a leaf out of Councillor Mackenzie's book and congratulate you first on the gravel extraction levels out of all rivers, but particularly the upper Motueka. That is really pleasing to see. I know Matt's been very much behind that. And will we get that message out there to the wider river landowners that we are taking out substantial volumes now, considering what we've taken out previously? I know some of them would like a lot more, but the amount we're taking out, I think, is quite sustainable and may not be for ever and a day, but certainly for now it is. Do have a question just in relation to the Waiheke. The total there, even 500 cubes is quite a lot for that river. Where was that predominantly taken from, do you know?
Through the chair, I'll have to get back to you on the locations for that, sorry.
Thank you. And then just further on in relation to the Waimea River and the issue that was raised in the public forum this morning, I would think that's an issue that I addressed. We had meetings with the O'Connors and Glenn when I was chair of the operations committee, and if my memory serves me correctly, there is some complicating factors around the stock bank and the leases, and it's a matter of them making some adjustments to their farming practices from memory.
Yeah, through the chair, yes, they are the only leaseholder who has free access over the stock bank, unrestricted. The stock banks have not been in their lease for a long time, not since Fergus O'Connor's Clydesdales. We would have regularly seen them on there, which we absolutely don't want in the stock bank. They damage the stock bank. The issue there, and it sounds, I know it sounds a little bit harsh. So this was dealt with by 2 previous managers in this space. It's a can that's been kicked down the road, and it's got to me. I grew up on a farm. I understand animals. I'm not a dairy farmer, so I can't know it all. I've asked dairy farmers. There's a difference belief about the impact. And I'd like to remind the council, this is a once a day milking operation. The cows are not going backwards and forwards all the time. If you go to any road crossing in this district, they do not have free access across that road. They bunch them up, they open the gates, they walk them across, and they shut the gate. So there's no reason why that cannot be done for these cows on the stock bank. And I do want to acknowledge the Connors. They are good farmers and they are looking after that land. So there's nothing wrong with the way the land is managed. What we need to get control of is the fact that for a long time we have been saying to the public that we were going to have access along that bank, and we don't do it. I think it's time to actually say we're going to do it. We were quite happy to negotiate the term as an end of this milking season or the end of the next milking season. But when you tell me, well, it won't work because that's going to stop our use of the land there, then I will grab the first date, because there's no point kicking it down the road if it's never going to get sold. So that's why from the lease will be extended till it's actually July, not June. And I know that sounds really harsh, but we can't keep kicking this issue down the road. It will be on council's expense. We will put the gates up. So essentially there's 2 crossings. The first crossing, the main crossing where the cows are going across, it is really good ground for calving. And we don't want to stop that. We want to see productive businesses, but they have to recognise this is public ground. They haven't owned the ground for over 70 years. It is not private ground. It is public ground. And it was, and I do acknowledge they used to own it. So we would pay for the 4 gates, the kissing gates for the bike to get through, the signage. So, it will be up to them to manage those 2 gates. I do not honestly believe that it will be a problem for their business. The health and safety issue, that we can't deny that animals are big. They have an obligation as a farmer to manage those animals. We have an obligation as the landowner to manage the safety of the people on the bank. We will put adequate signage. We will stop people coming through those gates fast. We'll put the kissing gates so they have to slow, and there'll be cognizance of them. The bottom end, we need to do some repairs to the stock bank. We'll put gates in there as well. I know it's probably not what they want to hear, but we can't just keep every time this comes up saying, all right, we'll let it go for another few years.
Thank you. It sounds like it will be good to get resolved.
I'm sure that's what we in part agreed when we did last night. When I was involved in the discussion, obviously that hasn't come to fruition yet. No.
Thank you. Thanks, Rob, for that explanation. Just help for those of us not familiar with the site. It's helpful to have a little bit more detail to better sort of picture that. Councillor Mayling, is there something to add to that?
There is access to the stock bank further up river. So people and I biked it from Brightwater right to the Appleby Bridge. So you're talking about the piece from the Appleby Bridge down, which we haven't been able to get access to. So people walk along that stop bank from Brightwater to the Appleby Bridge. It also goes near the fish out ponds, and people cycle it. During the lockdown, I cycled that regularly because you could do a loop. So it is a widely valued area going forward. And it would be great to have that final access, and it will link up with the Great Taste Trail, which runs right around the estuary. So it's one of the final links, because there isn't a link direct down the side of the river all the way now because of this issue. And I applaud what you're doing, Rob. I really do, because it's something we've been waiting for a long time.
Thank you. Councillor Kinnemont and then Councillor Butler.
Through you, Madam Chair. Is there anybody on Zoom?
Yes.
We just don't know who. We don't know who.
You'd like to know
inside the
who?
room, yeah, is on Zoom.
Yeah. People on the flight deck know who's on Zoom, and now we all do again. We had it up before.
Thank
All
you.
good.
Now
that it?
I've got a real question to ask. Gravel management again, page 37. Green LiDAR survey. That data, is that in the public domain, or is that private data and we buy that data from somebody?
Through the chair, so we're paying for that. So the Rivers account is paying for that. And once we have that data, that is freely available data. We don't. This is paid for with ratepayer money, so we freely give it out. And the really nice thing, so the difference between traditional LiDAR, you've heard us talking about LiDAR before, it takes this beautiful 3D layer of the ground surface. It's super accurate. We buy it to plus or minus 10 centimetres. We get at least plus or minus 3 centimetres generally. And this is 800 metres up in the air, so it's pretty amazing technology. The beauty of the green LiDAR is it can actually penetrate the water down, it's well over a secchi depth, so that's kind of, clearly visible down into the water. So this will give us a contour all the way down the river through the puddles as well, or through the holes in the river. So normally what happens is you kind of see a flat surface on the water because it's confused, and then so you have to make assumptions based on our old cross-section data. So now that we've already done one layer and we're doing another layer, someone will just put the two together, and you can color code it. So you can have, red for high and blue for low or whatever. So then we can go, and particularly I've been telling the people in the Upper Motueka, as soon as we get that data and those numbers, I'm really happy to share it, because then everybody knows. There's a bit of suspicion at the moment because someone's banding around the 600,000 cube of excess gravel in the Upper Motueka. It's an estimate based on widely spaced cross sections. There's no way that is right. So the LiDAR layers will give us a real number, which they know, we will know, and then it doesn't mean that's all available for extraction, but up there we have our envelope model, and then we can say where it's above the envelope, that's where we get in and manage. And I'm picking, so 47,000 cubic gravel out there this year. I'm picking, there's more available, but our primary driver here is about looking after the river as well. So we don't just say, there's gravel there, take it. What we say is, if you manage this stuff, it actually has a positive benefit from a management. And if it's done really well, it actually saves us on rock work. And that's, so our gravel person is Matt Mazzucchelli in the team. And he's been really good at looking at options. And because part of his role there as well is, and part of those extractions is to create safe islands for the birds to roost. Because if, otherwise the predators get them. So it's good to have some isolated spots in that. So he's actually been doing quite a nice job of managing the extraction to create habitat as well.
And just one last one then. So I presume this data distinguishes trees, branches, swimming in pools and things.
Through the chair, is Councillor McKimmott, are you asking where the trout will be? Yes, so the beauty of this, I could talk for hours about LiDAR. The beauty of this in another, and I could bring some information back to council later in the future, I mean, we can use LiDAR so we can tell the height of a tree, we can tell the vegetation. You get about 5 different hits from each beam. It's just a laser light going really fast. So Trevor James will be using this to look at riparian cover on all of our rivers. So now we have a complete data set. We got a lot of money, and right around the country, quite a bit of money out of the government to get the last of our area covered by LiDAR. That was the other version of LiDAR. So now Trevor has a data set that shows how sinuous the creeks are, where they are. We've actually ground truthed them to be, you know, in the right place. The kind of cover, the area that's covered by water. So this is an amazing data set. And it's the really cool thing about, you know, the good old days. There's never was a good old day in this case. It just gets better. And now with our investment in the DIP program and our ability to choose platforms that are not islanded or relic, we can update the systems to use this data. And the smart young people coming on board are just, they make me look like a fossil. It's incredible what they're doing. You know, we've got some of our younger staff now linking statistics with GIS layers and finding information, and it's amazing space. So maybe I could get them to come back and talk about some of that stuff. Or if you want to, I'm really happy for the councillors to come and see us. And I can
Might be a
take
way to
staff,
go is
I can
for
show
those
you.
that are, sorry, Rob, it might be a way to go for those that are interested, could come and meet with the team and just see how that's all working. But fantastic around accuracy, because certainly we hear about our rivers and all our regions, all our wards, you know, anecdotally, there's, you know, thousands of cube there and thousands of cube there, and you should take it away. So having this accuracy and to be able to say, actually, this is actually what's there, will be very helpful. Going to move to Councillor Butler and then Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just, you know, I know there's a lot of, we all know about rivers where the neighbours are getting, you know, upset just upstream from the Painsford Bridge is where farmers are, you know. But anyway, what I wanted to say was, firstly, I think it's a great move that there's going to be a closer working relationship between river engineering and environmental work. So I think that is timely, which I'm sure that you'll agree. Yeah. So now I just want to go to one. There's just a tricky little thing in coastal structures, 9.3, and I'll just draw your attention to the fact of the Collingwood Wharf, where there is a disagreement over who actually owns that structure and who's responsible for it. So docs say that that's council's, and council says that it's DOC. So we're in the situation where it's basically, well, it's falling down. It's quite dangerous. So that's just a coastal asset where there's a disagreement about who is responsible for it, and it would be quite good to have that resolved. Maybe it might be more in the regulatory space. I'm not sure. Thank you.
I'm confident it's not ours. The information I saw, it was put in by Tallies a long time ago. This is the one opposite the garage. It was put in by Tallies, and the information I read a long time ago is not ours.
Okay.
I can pay to get it removed if you want.
Well, so DOC are convinced that it's ours.
I don't want to pay for it to be maintained. We've got
no. I don't think we should. I don't think it's ours, but I'm just flagging that.
Great, thanks. So would you like something formally from staff to make it very, very clear it's not council's responsibility? Then this little roundabout could.
No, look, I'll take that offline.
Yeah, great, thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you very much. I've just got a few quick fire questions for Rob. I'm not sure if he can answer them because he's a fossil, but if you're a fossil, I'm not sure what we all are around the table, Rob, but anyway, fantastic report, such a huge amount of information. I don't know how you managed to stay across it, so thank you. my quick fire questions are, so the old man's beard sawflies. I tell you, I can hardly control my enthusiasm at the thought that this might be some solution to old man's beard. So is my enthusiasm warranted, do you think?
Yeah, that's the next report. I want to keep you hanging.
Yeah. We'll get
Okay.
it shortly. Your enthusiasm's really bubbled out there.
Am I on the wrong report?
Yeah,
Okay, very good.
unusually, yes.
Forget all that. I'll pass over to someone else.
So all of your questions relate to the environmental information. Okay. Anything further for where we actually are? No. Rivers and coastal structures. Is someone happy to move that we receive the report? Councillor Mayling. A second to Councillor Kinnamonth. Thanks, Rob. It's very helpful. I mean, not so much comes out here, but yes, it's very stimulating and very informative for us to understand the scope of the works that are happening, and there's certainly a lot going on for your team. And lovely to hear about the level of expertise with some of the staff and how the newer things are happening for us based on what they've done in the past. That's very good to hear. I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. And we'll move to your second report, environmental information. We will have all read it. If there's just one or two points you want to highlight, that's all good. And then we'd go straight to Councillor Mackenzie.
Could I just ask one question related to the last report? So traditionally it's been a section of Richard Kirby's report, but now that we've shifted it into Kim's space, does the councillor want to keep it as a standalone report, or do they want it merged into the EI manager's report? Righto. All right.
There's a mumble around the room of standalone, please.
Thank you. It gives me two chances to talk.
Let's go with your second report, environmental information.
Yeah. Sorry, if I could show you my prop. This is especially for Councillor Mackenzie. They're not crawling all over the top. I don't know where this was. I'm not sure it's okay to pass it around. Oh, yes. Yeah. Sorry, if I could take the report as read. I guess the main thing is I'd like to show, so these are the sawfly. We have released 2 lots already and are in the report in the Trass Valley and Motueka. So remember last year I reported that we had the gall mite. So we have a little mite that's struggling to do. This one, the last lot arrived. I was hoping they were going to be I was really excited about it because last lot arrived had been so hungry. There was just a whole lot of frass and sticks in there about it, but obviously those ones aren't quite as hungry. I think there's about 500 in there. So these ones are actually going into NCC because we operate together under our joint management. And we also want a range of sites so the climate or, unexpected events don't get them. And all 3 sites have had Vespex put out to keep the common or the German wasp away because, of course, they like to eat these kind of things. Unfortunately, we can't control paper wasps the same way, and paper wasps only take live prey, so it's a bit harder. But up there, the paper wasps are less of an issue. So these just look like a green caterpillar. I'm colourblind. I think it's a green caterpillar, and they just cut the leaves in half. So yes, so hopefully it won't. Remember, by controls never remove completely the target organism. What they'll do is they'll just knock the peak right out of it. So between our active management as a community removing vines and the 2 bugs having a crack at it, it should greatly reduce the vigour.
I think Councillor Kinnamonth can speak to this now.
Rob, so when you knock back the volume, the size of the plants, it inherently means that they're not gonna spread so much.
Yes, yeah. So ideally, it's just like when you haven't fertilised the tomatoes; they're a bit depauperate, and then you go and you get a couple instead of a lovely plant. So it just takes the goodness out of a lot of the plants. So instead of being, we've all seen old man's beard, it flowers prolifically. Hopefully, there will be less material to be able to generate lots of seed. So it just will take the whole vigour out of it, and that's the kind of approach we're really hoping for, with fingers and toes crossed for the wasp biocontrol agents. So we are still lining up to have a release this year, as long as nothing happens between now and the next month or two.
Yeah.
And that will be a game changer for us, because we are a notable hotspot for wasps. So yeah, this is the long-term control option.
Yeah.
Spray is not an option long-term.
Right. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you very much. Well, I'll remain enthusiastic. I think, it could be a game changer. Because it's terrible what's going on in this region at the moment with old man's beard. Paragraph 9.2, you're talking about the changes to hail guidance. And so states the current mapped orchard layer and hail register is not complete. Properties are added to the register following inquiries and on review of site investigation reports. My question is there any communication with the property owner before it gets added, the properties get added to the register?
Yes, through the chair. It largely depends on the number that we're dealing with. If it was a large scale change, then we would try and advertise it in a bulk kind of way. We have tried doing it in a large way in the past, and it's better to talk to individuals than it is to a large group. Most of these will be done, they're ones or twos as they're coming through, so they will get a letter. So it shouldn't be a surprise. The change will be for those 200 ERA sites. ERA is a funny term. It's the term that we have to use under the guidance. Actually, they're not an ERA, they were plants, but in the old days they didn't used to spray stone fruit with lead arsenate spray. So particularly in Motueka, there was lots of jam factory plums.
Yeah.
So we would see lots of orchards, we'd put them on the register, and then the landowner, when we told the landowner, they'd say, oh no, Grandad only grew plums. So then we know, plums, no lead arsenate sprays. We call it an ERA site, and that just stops the next person looking at that site going, oh, there's an orchard, we need to list it. So we now need to go back to those, because of course in some of those orchards they used other sprays, and we have taken a very I can't say the word permissive, we've taken a pragmatic approach to just targeting the effort where the effort's needed. So it was a lead arsenate spray. They are actually quite dangerous compounds, lead and arsenic. The guidance has always been quite clear about horticulture, industrial activities. So we are catching up with guidance. The guidance is ramping up. It's not unusual if you went to another region that your vineyard or your citrus grove would have been on the register. For us, it's been more about the glass houses, because they used to spray the glass houses with lead paint. The white paint was full of lead, or the lead arsenate sprays. But of course, we have tobacco ground. We have some of the berry ground. We know that we found some Dynaseb not far from here, which is quite a nasty compound a couple of years ago. So we know the sprays and stuff are out there. So it's just catching up. What would be really nice is just to say all rural land needs review. It would save a lot of angst, but we can't do that.
Yeah. Oh, no, thank you for that. Now, I'm not sure there is an answer to this question, but I'm looking at your graphs on the trends with the deep Moutere aquifer. Page 65 of the report, of the document. So, I mean, we're pretty much at historic lows based on records that we've got. How concerned are we about the level. And yeah, I mean, what does the science tell us, or the data in terms of the bounce back? What do we make of all of this?
Yeah, through the chair. So the link at the top actually takes you to the link that is on our website, so publicly available. And these are my favourite graphs of all time. These are called envelope plots. So they have maximum and minimum, and then what's happening. So the smart young people, of course, have done these again. So they make me look good. I've got no idea how to do it. Are we worried? Yes, absolutely, we're worried. It is really important to look at the scale on the side. So if you look at the top right graph, the scale there is only 2 meters. When you look at the bottom left graph, the scale there is 15 meters. So for me being concerned, I'm concerned about that one on the bottom left, because that drop is, it's a couple of meters below the bottom. Mutra gravel was reasonably stable. It does change. When we get an earthquake, we do see a change, and sometimes the level will drop, and that's a compaction issue. Overseas, compaction of aquifers is a global problem. And if you go to some places like Mexico City, where they're really massively over extracted, the ground is actually slumped, measurably large slump. It is an old lake. But in other places, ground does compact. We won't see that. But what it does is, as it compacts, you lose the capacity. So when it fills back up next year, it's just slightly less. So that is one, and that we will be watching. It's probably going to take more than a year for that one to rebound. Remember, this water is thousands of years old. That starts back up in Rosedale, so up towards Dovedale in that area, and it slowly trickles. Mutra gravel's all that clay-bound gravel, so it's really slow, and it makes its way down as it heads towards the coast. So it's old gravel. So what we're seeing here is a pressure response, a head pressure from the water up high, pushing the water down. But because it's recharged by the rain in Rosedale, it will take, we suspect there's probably going to be 2 years to get back to seeing it completely full again, assuming this doesn't happen again next year. And I know Kim has been paying a lot of attention to this. If this was an unconfined aquifer, so if this were that gravel aquifers like in Takaka surface or in the Waimea Plains, we wouldn't be concerned at all, because they're loose gravel, so water comes up and down. You see it come up and down because it's related to river level. Because these are confined, so they're under pressure underground, these are actually artesian. So if you put a bore into it, it will spurt water out the top. If you go to Stringer Road, it'll push it out about 10 meters. It's awesome. So these bores actually have a pressure cap on the top so we don't lose water. Up there, it's an issue. And when you read in the media that they still have really good water in the centre of the valley and our bore's in the wrong place, both bores are down, like 150 meters.
Yeah.
The relevance of where those bores are is irrelevant that one's 5 meters higher than the other one. They are both relatively, surprisingly efficient suppliers of water. So they will still get water in those bores, even though the aquifer's dropping around them, because they're right down in the aquifer. So it's when you read in the media that the water's flowing freely, that doesn't mean that's a good thing. It means that it's just a really transmissive well, and that's great for them. But we actually look at the trends, and that's one of the things why Kim gets Joseph to go through these and why we put them up on the website. So there's nothing hidden here. We're as concerned as I hope everyone else is when they see that. But we're also genuinely concerned about industry, because we survive on our productive base, which is why this is at a 35% of their allowed amount and not a cess take. So that is trying to find a balance between both. But I do recommend you go and have a look at that, click on the blue link and save it to you if you're like me, or save it to your favourites thing, and every couple of days you jump in and have a look around the district. So when you get a call from someone and they say, oh, Tapawera is looking low, you can actually look on there and go, oh, no, it's pretty similar to last week.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, actually, I do have one other. On the news yesterday, the farming program that somewhere in Tasman had received funding, a catchment group. What's that breaking news yesterday, or do you know which catchment group it was? Or do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that, but there are several groups who have received funding. So Merca's crew are funded by MFE funding, catchment
It
funding.
was just announced yesterday. It was a,
That'll be new
okay.
to me. Yeah, I'm not aware of anything.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just that person next year. Thanks, Rob. So I just want to go back to Councillor Mackenzie's 9.1 to 9.3 in terms of the hail sites. So that's absolutely significant. So most of Motueka West would have been orchard land in the early days. Our most recent subdivisions and builds that are there would have been on horticulture land. Now, what impact does that have for those existing properties? So, the advice has always been get a limb when you buy a property. This is now going to be subsequent to the limbs when lots of people have bought their properties. I just need to understand the process, and I've got one other question after that.
I guess there's a couple of things. One was that this would have all eventually been publicly available under the Natural and Built Environment Act. That's now been repealed, so the requirement to make this publicly available has dropped away. It's still our intention in time, when we can have really good confidence about the quality of the data, to have it as available as possible. It will be our hazard layers that we put out first before this information. The reality is there's a maxim in forensics that says every touch leaves a trace. And as humans, wherever we've been, we leave a trace. I grew up on a farm. I know we left traces. There's not a lot of land in this district that hasn't got some kind of impact. So anybody buying anything should be aware that, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. For a lot of the ground in Motueka, it's ex-orchard or ex-tobacco or ex-kiwi fruit or some other horticultural crop. So there's a good chance that when they come to, if they are changing use, remember this only impacts anybody at change of use. So if you're a horticulturalist and you're going to horticulture, no difference. You don't need to care. If you are going from horticulture to a childcare centre, then absolutely you need to care. And from our point of view, our primary aim about this legislation is to actually make sure that the next purchase of your property doesn't buy a risk they're not aware of, because some of this stuff can be bad for people. But also there's a secondary one here as well. Some of this ground might not have the metal contaminant, it might not have like lead or arsenic contamination, but it might have really high copper contamination, which is a problem if you're near a waterway. It is creating a little bit of a problem at the moment in that because it is impacted, it's no longer considered clean. So the soil is not at background. So it actually becomes something called Class 4 soil. Perfectly good soil to have for horticulture or farming. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the soil. We want that soil used for that. It just means that you can't just dump it wherever you like. So there's an interesting in speech marks conversation going on about how to manage that soil. So as long as you're treating it as surplus soil and you're taking it to other places on your land, that's fine. It's that you can't just dump it wherever you like. So there's it has an impact from that point of view, but that only comes up if you're changing use. So you're subdividing, you're changing it from horticulture to something else. But yeah, it's not without frustration for everybody.
So I might have two questions now. So in terms of if it's traditionally changed from horticulture to childcare, which that would be the case, I think I can think of a couple of Motueka that would have. What's that impact? And if hail sites are identified, is it up to the landowners to test to get that removed, or is it just automatically on there? What is the process in terms of that?
This is the legislation. I think the words are something like, if it is more likely than not. So we don't have to prove that it has high levels.
Yeah.
What we have to do is have reasonable cause. And it's really simple for us. We've got aerial photos back to the 1940s we can just look at them and we can clearly, there's no mistaking an orchard or a tobacco farm or a kiwi fruit. So we can see that clearly. That means to us, more likely than not. Under the way the RMA is structured, anything to do with the land is generally the landowner's responsibility. So if you buy it, it becomes your responsibility. And that's an issue for council when we're buying property or people want to dump stuff in our property, that we have to do it in an eyes open point of view. That's now our problem. It's no longer their problem. So yes, it creates an issue if you're changing. So if you were to come in, you would get a limb and it will say that this land has had previous activities that classify it as, and there's a whole lot of classifications, that it's hail property essentially. So if you were going to do say convert to a childcare and it previously was a pip fruit orchard, then we would require you to get a suitably qualified and experienced person to do an assessment. And there's two levels to that. One is essentially a desktop assessment. They would look at the history and say, yeah, that actually there is a reasonable case here. Then they would do a detailed assessment where they'd actually take some samples. They stand behind that professionally. We can't go and do that. And then that would have some conditions around it as part of that change. So yeah, it's actually a type of consent under the legislation.
And I've got a quick last one, and that's 9.5. And so my concern around FCC Mapua isn't necessarily the site, it's the different reports over different years that have stated or hinted that there might be dumping sites throughout our region. And do we know of those? And you don't have to answer this now. I've spent some time trying to find different minutes over different periods of decades. In fact, before Tasman District Council was even established. But are we aware? Who can I talk to about that in terms of not the site, but potential dumping sites for those chemicals when it was tidied?
If it's okay, just to wrap that up, and especially since Matt's here, generally we are. And the ones that make it to the media, there's been one that persistently comes up on the Takaka Hill. We've tested, we know they dumped it. This stuff went far and wide. We've tracked down most of those places. There's a whole file with affidavits and everything. We've gone and tested those sites. In the case for the Takaka Hill, there's nothing there. We've tested the water under the hill where it comes out. There's nothing there. That's been and gone. Most of the stuff where it was dumped has long ago gone, and it was wrong then. It was criminal then, but it's actually, that's the least of our concerns now because it's been and gone. We would love to know if there's a site that we're not aware of. So, and the person who manages this is Anna McKenzie, our contaminated site person, and that can, if people are concerned, they can contact us anonymously. They could just ring the front desk and say, I don't want my name to this, but are you aware of a site? But this is kind of a touchy subject because people are aware there's dumps all over the district. Most of those where we had sufficient evidence, we've tested, we've dug up, and that all occurred about 20 years ago, which is why you don't hear about it anymore.
Thank you. Councillor Dowler.
Yeah, mine's just about 9.4 about lead paint on dwellings. I know I've been involved with a property in Motueka where he wanted to do a 6 metre subdivision to shift his fence and had to be tested and had lead paint. It was cleaned up in that. But so now it says on all limbs. So are we identifying all old houses that were built pre-1960 in a town and putting the fact that they could have contaminated land because of someone sanded a house down, because that's what this guy did, and contaminate his land? Because to me, a dwelling site where people grow vegetables and everything like that, normally adjacent to the houses, is probably more risky than some of the rural sites.
It's through the chair, lead paint. This is kind of disappointing in a professional point of view that the ministry has not really dealt with lead paint under the hail legislation. We know it's a problem. Lead is really quite toxic. It causes developmental delay. It causes a lot of issues. The reason we got rid of it out of petrol was because it was so bad. The reason we don't have it in our paint is because it was so bad. Old buildings used lead paint. My other prop that I was going to bring today is a can of red lead. it is really heavy because it's like 50% lead or something. It's incredible. The issue here is, so what we do is we put it on all limbs, because the only way we could do it otherwise would be to go sit someone down with an aerial photo and go through every property with 23,000 properties in this district. That's just not going to happen. So it's essentially an advice note that if you have an old property, please be aware of it. Because the reality is, I know you're all spring chickens, but up until maybe 20 years ago, everybody knew about lead. You know, babies had cots that were painted with lead, the kids' toys. And so there was a really big push, probably 30 years ago actually, where you could get a strip and you could rub it on the paint and it changed colour if it was lead. For the last 20 years, since it's been taken out of petrol, nobody talks about lead anymore. So if you're a younger person buying a house or an old cot or old toys or pretty much anything that's painted, there could well be lead. Especially, I buy lead light windows. I know they're coated with lead, the old peeling paint. So if you're not old enough, you won't know that. So we're putting this on as an advice note, and it's really to protect the veggie garden, essentially, or the kid. Remember, I was never a dirt eater, of course, but my brother was. And so, it's protect them.
Thank you. Is that sufficient? Yep. Councillor Kinnemont.
Thank you, through the chair. Rob, that also leads on to my question that lead painted roofs. People collect rainwater off the roof and drink it. Where does that fit into this here in this limb? Do we have to notify that as well?
Through the chair. So lead. So it hasn't been in the paint for a long time. So essentially, instead of us identifying all the homes, we've just put it on all of those limbs. So we don't need to, but of course, remember, it is up to the homeowner to have potable water supply, so from their roof. So if they thought they had a really old, and some of those old roofs, I know the house I grew up, which is 110 years old, it still has the original iron because it's, it's 1/4 inch thick just about. So yes, that's a problem. And lead heads, which is why they remove them, of course, and of course Kia eat them and get high blood. So yeah, but you won't find, hopefully, lead head nails being used anymore.
Thank you. There's a lot in the report, isn't there? There's such a lot of areas, and the level of detail is great for us to sort of, get informed about the things that we're really wanting to know about. In terms of that link to Councillor Mackenzie's question around the graphs and then the link, it's a very, very good setup, isn't it, in terms of what you can access on there through that link. And I suppose, I'm not quite sure how many people out in the communities know about it. I imagine perhaps we've put it in our media releases or a Facebook post or something, just reminding people that they can look and see the information. It's a very, very good setup. So not a question, but I'm hoping that we are making that really obvious to residents of Tasman, just what's available to them there. And I suppose too, with the sampling happening for Waikato Pupu, that's available for the public, and you can get a lot of posts coming through, can't you? But I think hopefully the people who are interested in that particularly, they do catch it. And yes, and to that end, actually, in terms of Waikato Pupu, just noticing the information in the report around where things are, state of play there in terms of process. I understand Ngati Tamaran Council have got a meeting coming up quite soon in April. So good to have that available publicly. And there is also on the website, I don't know if councillors know this, they probably do. They're not looking much interested in the moment, but looking in the room, isn't it? But the information available on our website around Waikato Pupu, WCO, and what we're doing, there's quite a lot of information in there, and I'm not quite sure how publicly that's known. So I suppose that's something for our comms team about just making sure that we are, you know, this idea that we hide things and we're not transparent and we don't want people to know. It's a bit of nonsense, you know. So just what is available is great, but we want people to be able to access it. Yeah. And I think that WCO information is particularly important given the level of interest and so that we are showing where we're up to. You know, I'll come to that in a sec. Very good to see Paul Sheldon acknowledge today what a contribution that he's made. And something else. That might be me just yeah. Oh no, I've got something to. I just had a look. I was looking for the piece that Councillor McKenzie was speaking to around a media release or something around some funding. I had a quick squiz and I didn't find it, but I did find something posted 14 minutes ago to say that the Agricultural Minister has classified an intense dry spell in Marlborough, Tasman and Nelson districts as a medium-scale adverse event. The move unlocks tax and other support for affected farmers and growers through inland revenue, and parts of Marlborough, Tasman and Nelson are in the grip of an intense dry spell. Forecast isn't looking so good. It'll linger into autumn. So, and Rural Communities Minister said it came on top of 20,000 made available to the Rural Support Trust. And as I was looking through that, I also saw there was a fire at Tata Beach, vegetation fire last night, and actually I can't quite pick where it was there. No houses and sheds at risk, but that's been one of the areas when FENS came and spoke to our community board in Golden Bay, and they had identified areas or little settlements or, you know, where people are living that were particularly at risk of needing a sort of exit strategy around fires and to be coordinated. Tata Beach was identified, so I just wanted to tag that in. I thought I could slip it in on this dry weather announcement, and now it's over to you for something much more sensible.
Thank you, Chair. So, and just on the dry weather announcement, that was signalled to us by MPI earlier this week, and there was a full meeting yesterday of all interested parties. That is a forerunner to that ministerial announcement. It's not a drought, but it's the next step. It's get very close to it. And the version that we had was that this region is probably ahead of the other regions in terms of the extremity of facing, but the government's looking across the country. So it hasn't got to the point yet of really acknowledging the conditions that we're facing as being absolutely into that drought criteria, but acknowledging that this area is getting close, hence the announcement and hence the support that's being offered. But I just wanted to just pick up on a point that just reinforcing the importance of Rob's report on the environmental information and the foundation that it serves us as a council for not only state of the environment reporting, but also for the design and indeed implementation of our regulatory framework. It's a really, and I think that's part of why the Environment and Regulatory Committee brought these two themes together, so we can get an understanding of what the science is telling us and then what our frameworks are doing about it and the various actions that have been taken across the staff. So I think today was a really classic example of the benefits of bringing those two things together. But we're also subject at times to government moving the goalposts or changing emphasis, etc. And there's an announcement today, which I think speaks to some of the work that Rob and his team actually do, where the Associate Environment Minister, Andrew Hoggard, has announced that the government has agreed to suspend the requirement for councils to comply with the significant natural areas provisions of the Natural Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity by 3 years. So adding 3 years. And the comment that he's made about this is, as it stands, SNAs identified on private property limit new activities and development that can take place on that property. In their current form, they represent confiscation of property rights and undermine conservation efforts by the people who care most about the environment and people who make a living from it. So again, it's an example that the government feeling a little bit uneasy about these things biting, and they've pushed things out 3 years. And that's we talked today about the National Policy Statement for Freshwater. The National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity actually sits alongside that as being key national direction on our environmental responsibility. So just goes to show that, while we're sitting here today, this announcement's come out. Councillor Hill's talked about the other announcements come out on droughts. And so the ground's moving around us all the time. And it's emphasises our need to be agile and adaptive to something that's fast moving at the moment. But just getting back to my initial point, just reinforcing the value of what Rob's bringing to the table today and the efforts of the team that's sitting behind that.
Thank you, Kim. Councillor Dowler, and looking for someone to move the report, I think.
Happy to do that.
Do we have a move? We haven't already, do we? No. Thank you.
Just 1.4, Rob, to do with the Motueka airshed testing for the 2.5. The comment that it didn't exceed it, which is great, blah, blah, blah. So you're stopping the monitoring until such a time that a new standard for PM 2.5 is introduced. You're waiting further advice from the Ministry of the Environment on the future requirements to monitor and manage the 2.5. So it could get harsher, maybe.
Through the chair, it will if it comes in. We've been waiting 5 or 6 years now. I've had, I keep shifting it every couple of years, some money to build essentially a monitoring hub in Motueka, because we know when it comes in, we will have to continuously monitor. The good news about that is, though, that the PM10 is not breaching in Motueka. We had one exceedance, so we're allowed one exceedance. The 2.5 is the stuff that damages us from a health point of view. So, that is an issue in Motueka. It's domestic fires, I can't, I'm a hypocrite. I've got a domestic fire as well. So if we live in an urban area and we have domestic fires, we're going to have that issue.
So, the one a bit above it about Murchison that I read as well, does that ring any alarm bells?
Through the chair, it's a very similar issue. Until we get the legislation, it's been frustrating as heck to wait this long for something that the science has been solid for decades. The process has been solid. Nationally, we've been anticipating it for a long time. It will eventually come, I think. This around the country, and I don't have the stats at hand, around the country, the deaths related to poor air quality, it's significant. We get quite concerned about the things we see, but this is a silent killer because it actually affects the weak and the young, particularly older people, emphysemic, if you've got respiratory issues, because it's not just advanced death, which means you die sooner than you're anticipating. It's actually restricted activity. So what it does is it restricts a whole lot of activity. And there's some classic work done in Canterbury that whenever there's a bad air quality day, the hospital admissions rocket up. So it is a real issue. The government needs to deal with it. Hopefully they deal with it sensibly, and then we can do something about it. But at the moment, essentially, we've done it. We know there's an issue. We're just going to save some money in the meantime.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. And you have the second? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just in relation to the information that came out today about SNAs, and I just wanted to do a shout out to our the relationship that our ecologists have built up with the landowners, and that they have successfully achieving just about a full cover on a purely voluntary basis. So we've managed to actually do effectively map SNAs in our region with voluntary buy-in, so it has never become regulatory, and we're now in a really good position to actually continue with that building those relationships, because that regulation's not going to come in now by the sound of it. Yeah.
Thank you. That might be us. Very good report, Rob. Lots in there. And the more we get things public, the better. I'd still love to see us have these reports available publicly as a whole report, so people can get onto our agenda and go through and track through and find things. But imagine if we can just post your report, a link to your report, the environmental monitoring report on Facebook or wherever else we go on the website, so that people can just tag into that and read it. And I think we're missing something there. It's been spoken about not so long ago, but I'd like to see us further that. Shouldn't be too difficult. It will be extra work for somebody, of course. We've got a mover, Councillor Dallas, second by Councillor Butler. I'll put the resolution to receive the report. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you, Rob. Pass on our appreciation to your team.
If I could say, remember, I'm just the mouthpiece. It's actually my team that do an awesome job. So I love getting their information because it means I don't have to do the work. So thank you.
Pass that on to them, won't you? If there's nothing further, that's us, I think. I'll close our meeting with karakia. Thank you all.
There's just a comment that the workshop is on this afternoon. Yes.
Yes, there is a workshop on this afternoon, Environment Policy ONFL and CE workshop, 1:30 till 4.
It's confirmed.
Plenty of time for sandwiches in between. So nothing further. Thank you, Rachel and Jody, on the flight deck there. That's very helpful to have your support. Thanks a lot. Karakia tātou. Kia hiki te kōrero, kia wātia, kia mama te manawa o te tangata. Kia u ki te ara mō tātou e ora nei. Ko rongo, ki runga, kia tina, hui e, tae kia. Thank you, everybody.